Zathura is a movie about two kids who get shot off into space in a house as a result of playing with this board game that they find in the basement. Now, these two kids don't get along very well. Their parents are divorced. They haven't really dealt with that yet. They're not getting along with each other. They're very competitive. The little brother's not getting enough from the older brother, and the older brother doesn't want the little guy around. And they're both very competitive for their dad's affection. Now, you put these two kids in this situation, and they have to learn to work together to fight all the things that come out of the game, like stranded astronauts, these out-of-control robots, lizard men, pirate guys, spaceships, asteroid showers, these big scary planets with strong gravity fields. And so the challenges that the game present are all within sort of the genre of science fiction and adventure. And it's how these kids overcome these obstacles and how they grow through the process of facing these things that is the real story behind the movie. I was involved in adapting the book to some extent. I had read a draft that was written by David Koepp and John Camps that took a book that was about 25 pages and took the imagery that's very strong that Chris Van Allsburg did a really nice job on through his artwork and his storytelling, and it expanded upon that and added an emotional dimension about these three kids that were growing up in a broken home. And that's sort of the core of the emotional aspect of the movie.
Well, the amazing thing about David Koepp was the basic story of the movie is very, very true to the book. But what he did, and he did it with such fidelity to the book, was he delved into the emotional relationships with the boys and also created these great action sequences that are suggested by the book, but because the book can only show a little bit of it, they're only suggestions. And he found these fantastically ingenious ways of both creating great action, great suspense, and also dramatizing the emotional story between these two boys, which is the center of it. And yet, he didn't add a lot of plot. You know, it's not like there's a whole complicated plot. The plot is very, very easy to understand, but he just found a way of kind of getting inside it and just making the most of every single moment.
It's just wonderful, you know, the way he expanded everything and took the themes in the book and the basic idea and just kind of, it became this wonderful adventure. So I think David, using the basis of kind of like real brothers, they feel very real, how they would behave and how they would come to grips with their kind of competitive natures and how they would eventually team up and work to bring themselves home. I think all that plays very real, which allows you to buy into the fantasy elements. And part of casting Tim was an effort to maintain that reality quotient where you feel like it's a real family struggling with real issues.
It sucks is what it does, but it's the best I could come up with. So climb off my back and give me just 2 inches of space, will you please?
You know, then you get into these very big action set pieces that David Koepp is very famous for. And what I liked about his draft is it preserved a lot of the imagery and the strong juxtapositioning of images, a house in space, Saturn right outside your door, a Zorgon pirate scurrying through a hole in the roof, a meteor smashing through the television set in the living room.
John worked with Dave to bring, I think, some more of the tone that John brings to things. He has a very real flavor. His sense of humor is always grounded in a very real place. And there was a decision to take the movie tonally to a very real place, whereas if these things are really happening to these boys, it needs to be scary. It needs to be very heartfelt in the right times. It needs to be funny.
What I sort of think that I excel at is relationships between people. That's sort of my roots in the smaller movies. And my background as a writer and as an actor helps me create a situation where the actors could do something that's true and real.
Dude, that's our food.
Yep. And you're running low on supplies.
And the more real the situations are, even in an extraordinary, set of circumstances like a house in space, if you can make it emotionally real and have the characters communicate in a real way, it grounds this crazy story in reality and allows the audience to really relate and experience the movie with the characters.
Things happening among the kids, sorting out what's going on while they are engaged in this game that takes them to different places, and they're learning that with us. And in order to believe that actually you can open a door and see Saturn and the rings there, you have to come from a place of reality. When you're building up that and having a very strong grip in reality, then you open the door and you feel with the kids what they can feel. And them as actors, they can have then the tools to relate and grow emotionally in their own characters as things progress.
But anytime when you have as much tension as is generated by a movie like this, where you have kids and monsters and everything's going haywire and everybody's scared and playing it real, there's great opportunities for laughs, and I tried to take advantage of those opportunities.
I got it. Flunk Space Academy. Go back one space.
I'm not even gonna comment on that.
The fact that it starts off in a house and most of it takes place in the house is nice because you feel a connection to your environment. And, of course, what we needed to overcome was that you don't want to feel trapped in a house for the whole movie. And so we wanted to make the house as interesting as we could. We wanted to make, the cliche, you make the environment a character. We really wanted to make this house something spectacular so that when it comes apart over the course of the film, you really feel like it's it's a tragedy.
I don't think we should play that game anymore.
Mike Riva was really cool to collaborate with because he wants to know why you're doing something. He doesn't want to just know what you want. And then once you share with him what the goals are, he could then come up with other ideas.
After Tim Robbins leaves the film in the beginning to go off and doesn't come back to the end, we had to keep his presence alive in the movie. And rather than just put them in any old house, John and I decided early on that we wanted to depict a man who is recently divorced, who's trying to make an old house into a home.
I know it's not Mom's house, and I know it's a little creaky, but give it some time. It's going to grow on you.
So we picked a house, and we picked a design, and as it developed, John loved that craftsman thing. So we just went to town and made it all the things about a craftsman house that we liked, but big enough to suit our action.
The challenge was to make enough happen to the house over the course of the film that every time you hit the set, it was different. Every time you enter the living room, it's in a different state of disintegration, so it feels like you're going into new areas throughout the course of the film. It doesn't feel like you're in the same environment the whole time.
That was great.
We've been fortunate in being able to shoot pretty much in continuity, which means that you shoot in the order that the scenes actually happen in the film. So everything that happened speaks to the next scene.
It actually kept the entire crew and the director and everybody else in sync with the process of the movie, because the house goes through so many stages that we had to shoot it in that order.
You got a pretty serious organ problem.
Michael Riva, our production designer, and his crew brought an extraordinary level of detail and inventiveness to all the sets. The Zorgon spaceship, which has backed up into the basement, and there's this whole conveyor belt, and they're shoveling all the stuff from the house into this huge fire. And you just look at it and you just go, oh my God, and there's so much imagination and so much detail and so much inventiveness.
We wanted something that would contrast totally to what we were seeing for most of the picture. Most of the picture we've been inside this wooden house, and now we had an opportunity to break that envelope, even for a brief period, to give us a bit of a breather. And that turned out to be the spaceship.
Caught cheating, automatic ejection. A lot of the stunts are real. On the gimbal set, the Source 3, when the gravity starts to change, I come sliding all the way down, like 45 feet, down this long thing, and I stop because I hit the wall, and everything comes flying. It's really cool. It's really fun because I get to go in a harness. This set that we're on right now, it shakes. It's really cool.
We wanted kids who were game for that, who were going to be game for being in a house that tilted, for being in a house that shook. When that house shook, especially towards the end of the movie, that's like a 8.0 earthquake. I mean, it's scary in there. It seems like the whole thing's going to fall apart. And then we also had a lot of wire work for them. They were hanging from wires and, all the zero-G stuff. Most of that was done on the house, but then we also had certain things where they would be hanging or dropping down on cables, and we had to, make sure that they'd be comfortable with that.
I'm about to fly on a harness.
For both of our actors, Jonah and Josh, I had them in rehearsals months ago of getting them in harness. I had special harnesses made for them, and getting them on the wire and getting them used to it. We're so lucky that our actors are kids that are extremely athletic, very smart, and very coordinated. And I've been using them for 99% of the stunts. I use my son Reed, and Logan Brown is our other stunt double for our Danny character. I mostly use them for rehearsals, and once we have it down to exactly what it needs to be, then I make the determination if it's safe enough for them to do it. Whenever we were on the gimbal set, they walked and moved, but they were always connected to something, so they were safetied off. Josh had to walk up through the study and then wedge himself into a doorway. When it went to max tilt, and the robot starts grabbing at him, robot gets a hold of his shoe and pulls him, and he slides all the way through the whole length of the house and crashes into the front door. With Jonah, he had a little more intricate business to do because he's hooked on wires on an overhead traveler track. He's starting to walk up through the living room. He grabs a hold of the bookcase. As he grabs a hold of the bookcase, the floor is tilting, and he starts flying up off the ground. So we had to coordinate the wires of him being pulled up off the ground and working his way up the bookcase to grab a hold of a light sconce. He grabs the light sconce, it breaks, the wire breaks, and now he flies all the way across the room on wires. It was quite a bit of business for him, but no problem. They never complained once and would laugh the whole time, so it was great.
They kind of make it hard on me even because I have the harness and all that, but then there's a string they put a string on the back of me, and Tom Harper, the head stunt guy, he was pulling on it, so it was really hard for me to get up to the lamp to hold on to. My favorite scene is when I get ejected, because the feeling of weightlessness, because I'm just sitting there and I go vroom, right through the roof. And it is amazing how fast I went up, and you felt your stomach just drop. That was so much fun. I had a hard time not laughing because I had such a good time doing it. And it was really cool is that you get ejected up, and then you're hanging upside down on this set, and you're just hanging there trying to reach up, and that was just so much fun, just getting to hang, just hanging out.
But ultimately, we needed kids who were going to be comfortable, throwing their body at this movie and trusting that they'd be okay. And these kids never got scared. And that's part of the reason we were able to be as ambitious as we were in the filmmaking. I grew up watching Star Wars and all of Spielberg's early stuff, and that's what going in the movies was to me. And I think there are different sizes of films to tell different types of stories. If you're dealing with this type of movie, you have a very big canvas to paint on. And this type of subject matter is appropriate to do a movie of this size. But a movie like this, it's like you have a whole other range of tools available to you. And the ability to build sets like this, the ability to do special effects, miniatures, robots, computer-generated images, all of that stuff is, it's a lot of fun for me, and having a little experience with that type of stuff, it's sort of the next logical step for me to keep it interesting, to grow as a filmmaker.
I also think when you have a great story and you have a great script, it becomes a magnet for everybody. It was a magnet for John. It was a magnet for the cast. It was a magnet for great production designer Michael Riva, great cinematographer Guillermo Navarro, our costume designer, all of our set decorators, all the people. Everyone was drawn to this because it's more than just a job. You go on an experience, and when you make a movie, you really are drawn to it not just because it's a paycheck. You're drawn to it because there's something special about it, the promise of a great emotional experience.
It's a big ride, and there's no slow spots. It's just one fun, the thing just catapults you through the adventures that the game presents, and it's really exciting to watch. It's exciting to work on. It's a fun movie.